The galaxy was full of voices, but the quiet ones were easy to miss. Far from the bright trade lanes, a blue planet sent out little threads of sound. Music, talk shows, weather reports, old countdown clocks, and news of first steps on a dusty moon. The signals drifted through cold space like seeds on a night wind. Most watchers never looked twice. To them, the planet was one more young world with too much noise and too little order. In the vaulted hall of the Galactic Council, 1,000 lights flickered over the curve of a chamber that had no true floor or ceiling. Delegates floated in their cradles. Some were scaled, some were feathered, others looked like slow storms held together by will. They debated trade and borders and wars that never quite ended. When a minor surveyor from the fringes requested time to speak about an emerging species from a yellow star, the chamber dimmed with polite impatience. Ilara Voss asked for only 6 minutes. She was slim and gray-skinned with eyes that caught starlight like polished glass. Her people were patient mapmakers who rarely raised their voices. She played a sequence of human broadcasts and showed a scatter of images. Spinning stations, rockets that fell back to sea, a pale footprint on a dead plane, a classroom where children built little robots that followed lines drawn by a marker. She spoke about patterns. She spoke about a certain speed of learning. She named it hunger. Many delegates drifted in their cradles. They were not unkind, but they were old. Old empires learn calm the way cliffs learn the sea. One elder from the Radiant Belt asked a soft question. If this world was so hungry, where were its starships? Where were its envoys? Where were the signed pacts and stamped tariffs? Ilara answered with the simple truth. They were not ready yet, but the pace was not normal. The graphs did not curve. They climbed, a vote was called. The council issued a label and filed a report. The world was marked volatile. Observation would be light. Approaches would be discouraged. No uplifts. No embargoes, no alarms. The chamber moved on to discuss a mining tax in the outer ruins. Ilara felt the decision settle like dust on a map. She did not argue. She only saved the data and set a private reminder to look again in one local decade. At the edge of an ocean on that blue planet, dawn slid over a line of concrete and steel. A naval test range woke to the smell of salt and hot metal. Ethan Carter stood on a platform that shook under his boots. He liked mornings here. The air was clean. The work was clear. He ran a hand over a set of housing plates and checked the alignment marks one more time. Beside him, Amanda Brooks squinted at a tablet. Her hair was tied back with a rubber band she had found in the lab drawer. She always forgot to bring a proper tie, and she always forgot to buy one. The device in front of them looked simple from a distance. It was only a long steel spine inside a heavier shell, supported by coils and rails and armored cabling. Up close, it was like a cathedral. Layers of copper and ceramic, fat capacitors sleeping under coolant lines, sensors tucked in neat rows. Amanda tapped a screen. Numbers bloomed. Field strength, temperature, timing gates. Ethan called to the crew on the far side of the range. His voice was calm. He had the kind of voice that made people listen without thinking about it. They had been told a dozen times that this project was too heavy, too hungry, too hard on parts. Coils would warp, rails would erode, the armature would weld itself to the barrel. Every failure had a neat term in the manual, and every fix took a week and 3 new ideas. But each month the line on the chart rose. Each month the shots went farther and truer. The small tungsten slugs were not bright and they did not scream. They slipped into the morning and cut the air as if the sky were cloth. Today was a milestone. The range safety officer gave them the field. The last shipment of upgraded capacitors had arrived from a plant upstate, and the new control software finally talked to the old sensors without throwing errors. Amanda rubbed a spot of grease from her thumb onto her jeans and said she would never get the stain out. Ethan said it would be a badge of honor. She laughed and told him to save the speeches for the board. They ran the warm-up. They checked the locks and interlocks. They watched the voltage climb like a slow sunrise on the gauge. The crew quieted. Birds along the shore lifted and wheeled as if they felt the charge in their bones. Amanda called the countdown. The platform trembled. The slug left the barrel like a thought leaving the mind. A fraction of a second later, a sound reached them. Not a bang, but a deep, short shudder in the ribs. Far downrange, a reinforced slab shattered. Sensors blinked and wrote their little truths. Graphs flowed into curves that made both of them stand still. The muzzle velocity was past the line they had drawn on the whiteboard 6 months ago, the line everyone had laughed at. The power draw was within tolerance. Barrel wear had dropped since the last redesign. For a long breath, neither of them said anything. Then Amanda whooped, and the crew on the far platform answered with cheers that the wind snatched and tore apart. News liked bright things that made good video. Kinetic weapons did not. So the story of that morning did not trend. A blurry clip of a gray barrel, a shot you could not see, a slab crumbling in the distance. It looked like a bad special effect. But the report that landed on a desk in a quiet office in the capital did not care about views. It cared about numbers. It cared about a line on a chart that would not stop climbing. Ethan drove back to the facility after lunch and found a message in his inbox. A review board would visit in 2 weeks. He would give a briefing. He passed the news to the team and let them have the rest of the day to clean up and call home. He stayed. He liked the lab when it was empty. You could hear the coolant still ticking in the lines. You could smell the ocean under the metal and the plastic. He walked the length of the barrel with his hand on the housing as if it were a sleeping animal he did not want to startle. Amanda returned with takeout boxes and set one near his elbow. She told him to eat before the noodles turned to glue. They sat on milk crates and talked about small things. A broken coffee grinder in the break room. The way the gulls yelled like old men. The rumor that the base gym was getting new treadmills. Then they fell into the bigger talk that always waited under the small talk. Could the barrel be made modular for faster swaps? Could the power storage be made safer without getting heavier? Could the software predict rail wear before it happened so the crew could plan the maintenance window, instead of waking up to an alarm? They did not talk about aliens. They did not know there were aliens to talk about. They only knew that rocks fell from space sometimes, and sometimes people with bad ideas came by sea, and it made sense for a small planet to be ready for large problems. The sky above them played dumb and harmless. But in a bloom of static high beyond the blue, a listening probe turned its dish and sent a tight whisper toward a relay on the dark side of a far moon. The message bounced through stations like a stone skipping on a lake. It ended in the same chamber where Ilara had been given 6 minutes. An assistant drone filed it with 3 other notes about the same fringe sector. The report said that a set of wrecks had been found near a quiet corridor used by smugglers. The hulls were torn as if the metal had been pulled apart by invisible claws. Shield emitters were intact but useless. The report used a phrase that sat oddly in the mouth of the chamber's language. Kinetic breach. The delegate from the Bright Shoals suggested pirates were fighting pirates. The delegate from the Dust Plateau said a patrol would look when it could. Ilara asked to add the report to her map and mark it with a color she used for things that did not fit, but might matter later. No one objected. The chamber moved on. A committee debated noise limits near a monastery built inside the shell of an old comet. On Earth, the test range became a rhythm. Build, fire, measure, change, build again. The railgun was not a single invention. It was a ladder made of little steps, each one held by bolts you could touch and code you could read. A junior tech named Leo joked that the project was like a garden. You watered it with sweat and swore at the weeds, and then one morning something you planted months ago decided to grow. Amanda said that made Ethan the gardener-in-chief. Ethan said the garden did not care who wore which hat as long as the sun rose on time and the fences held. The fences did not hold as well as they thought. A corporate drone flew over the bay one afternoon and angled its camera at the range. It was legal airspace, but the footage it captured was not meant to be shared. A clip leaked later and drew little attention from the public, but it drew the attention of a different sort of watcher. A small group that read budgets like weather maps and had friends who ordered metal by the kilometer began to call each other. They were not villains. They were planners. They had seen storms come without warning. They asked for a closed meeting in a room with no windows in a building with soft carpet that made footsteps disappear. Ethan and Amanda arrived with printouts and a portable model that used magnets to push little coins along a track. They spoke in quiet, simple sentences. They did not sell. They explained. A question at the end hung in the air. If a ship in orbit could throw a slug at that speed, what kind of shield could block it? Amanda answered first. She said no known concept of a shield could stop a dense object moving that fast without turning the ship itself into a shield, and the crew into a cushai. The months after the breakthrough were filled with long hours and steady progress. The naval range became like a second home to Ethan and Amanda. The railgun was no longer just a strange machine on a lonely platform. It became a growing system of weapons, tests and ideas that pulled in more people each week. New faces joined the project. Engineers, technicians, analysts, and even young cadets eager to learn. The air smelled of hot metal and coffee. It was the smell of a team pushing forward together. The second prototype was bigger. It had stronger rails and improved cooling systems. Amanda worked with a group of machinists who argued about tolerances until midnight. Ethan spent his time running drills with the crew, teaching them how to move as one during a firing cycle. He wanted them to understand that the weapon was not just a machine, it was a promise that Earth would be ready if danger came from the skies. The first test of the larger railgun drew a crowd. Officials from the Defense Council arrived in neat suits and polished shoes. They tried to look calm, but their eyes were sharp with curiosity and worry. Reporters were kept outside the fence, guessing at what was hidden within. The crew ran through the checks. Voltage climbed. Coils thrummed. When the slug tore through the air and smashed a reinforced target to dust, the sound echoed across the ocean. The visitors clapped politely, but in private they exchanged quick looks. They knew what this meant. They knew Earth had stepped into a new age of warfare. Word spread quickly among those who handled secrets. Small notes passed through quiet channels. Some were worried. Some were excited. A few whispered about the balance of power. Old weapons could be countered by shields and armor. But this new weapon cut through those ideas like a knife through paper. A simple slug of metal, accelerated by magnets, was cheap and deadly. Nations that had once struggled to trust each other now gathered in hidden rooms to discuss how they could unite around this power. For the first time in centuries, Earth began to look outward, not as many divided lands, but as one planet. Amanda found herself busier than ever. She drew plans for even larger systems. She spoke with factories about materials that could survive repeated shots without burning out. She trained new engineers in the language of current, resistance, and timing. She laughed often, even when her eyes carried the weight of exhaustion. Ethan supported her. He carried himself like a leader who knew the work was bigger than him. When the team faltered, he reminded them why they were building this. He said the sky was wide and full of unknowns. It was better to prepare than to wait for surprises. Far above, the Council received new reports. More pirate ships had been found in pieces near human space. Wreckage told a clear story. Shields shredded, hulls pierced clean through. Some suspected new human weapons. Others claimed rival alien groups were to blame. Ilara Voss read the reports with a quiet heart. She saw the shape of things to come. But when she spoke in the chamber, few listened. They said humans were still too far from the stars. They said the Council had bigger matters. She saved her warnings anyway. She saved every scrap of data she could find. On Earth, the Terran Defense Fleet was born. It started with a single ship, the Liberty, built around the railgun design. Its hull was dark and angular, made to carry the coils and capacitors that could deliver devastating shots. Ethan was assigned as its first gunnery commander. Amanda oversaw its systems as chief engineer. The day the ship left the docks, the crew stood at attention, their uniforms crisp against the morning sun. They did not know if they would ever fire in anger. But they were ready. Training aboard the Liberty was unlike anything before. The crew learned to move with the rhythm of charging capacitors, the hum of magnetic fields, and the thud of recoil dampers. They practiced firing at drones launched over the sea. Every test made them sharper. Ethan drilled them on discipline. Amanda drilled them on precision. Together they built not just a ship but a culture of readiness. Beyond Earth's orbit, listening posts began to whisper. Smugglers told stories of ships that vanished after passing too close to human space. The Council received these rumors and waved them aside. They believed no young race could wield such force so quickly. But disbelief did not change the truth. The Liberty and her railguns were real. The men and women aboard her were not afraid. One evening, Amanda stood on the deck with Ethan. They watched the sunset burn across the horizon. She told him she felt the weight of what they had made. A weapon that could tear apart any ship known to the galaxy. She feared it as much as she was proud of it. Ethan told her the weapon was not the danger. The danger was forgetting why they built it. He said they built it to keep Earth safe, not to conquer others. Amanda nodded, though her eyes still carried doubt. She knew the Council would not stay blind forever. That night, a probe from the Troll Dominion slipped into human space. The Troll were a warlike species greedy for expansion. They had heard whispers of new weapons, and they came to see for themselves. The probe scanned Earth's orbit. sending images back to its masters. It saw the Liberty. It saw the railgun arrays. It saw humans preparing for something greater. The probe did not return. Its signal cut out after a sharp burst of static. But the images reached Trawl Command. Plans were made. An invasion was set. Back on Earth, life carried on. Most people did not know of the railguns, the Liberty, or the danger that drifted closer each day. Children played in parks. Families ate dinner. Factories produced parts without knowing what they would build in the end. But those within the project felt the shift. They knew the calm was only the beginning of a storm. Amanda wrote notes late into the night. She drew sketches of orbital platforms armed with railguns so large they could strike targets across thousands of miles. Ethan reviewed tactical reports, imagining how a battle in orbit would unfold. They both knew the Council could no longer ignore Earth. The day was coming when humanity would show the galaxy what it had become. The Trawl Dominion gathered its fleet. Dozens of warships armed with plasma cannons and heavy shields. Their leaders laughed when they saw the human defenses. They thought humans were young and weak. They thought Earth would be easy prey. They were wrong. They did not understand what a railgun shot could do. They did not understand the hearts of the men and women who had sworn to protect their planet. The Liberty trained harder. The crew slept in shifts, their bodies growing used to long hours. They grew close, bonded by duty and trust. Amanda walked the engineering bay like a teacher, reminding each worker that every bolt mattered. Ethan stood in the control room, drilling the gunners until their timing was perfect. They both carried the quiet knowledge that their time of testing was ending. The real test was near. In the council chamber, Ilara Voss once more asked to be heard. She spoke of patterns in the wreckage, of kinetic weapons unlike any used before. She warned that humanity was no longer a quiet world. She begged them to pay attention. The chamber dismissed her again. They said humans had no fleets worth fearing. They said the council would not waste time on shadows. Ilara left the chamber in silence, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the shadows would soon become fire. The skies above Earth were calm, but the sea of stars was restless. Somewhere beyond, the trawl ships powered up, their engines burning bright. They plotted a course that would bring them straight to the blue planet. They dreamed of conquest. They dreamed of slaves. They did not know they were flying into the teeth of a weapon their doctrines had no answer for. On the Liberty, Ethan Carter stood at his post and watched the stars. Amanda Brooks adjusted the coils for the 100th time, her hands steady even as her mind raced. The crew waited, ready. They did not know when the storm would break, but they knew it was coming, and when it came, they would not yield. The galaxy still turned, unaware of how close it was to change. The council debated trade routes and minor disputes. The Trawl Dominion sharpened its claws, and Earth, small and underestimated, armed itself with weapons that would shatter the old balance. The railguns were ready. The warriors were ready. The world was ready. Only time stood between them and the day the galaxy would finally understand what humans had become. The night before the invasion came, the stars above Earth looked calm. No one on the ground could see the silent fleet of the Trawl Dominion moving closer through the darkness. The ships glided like shadows, their engines hidden, their weapons charged. The Trawl commanders were certain of victory. They had crushed many young races before. They had taken slaves and resources without fear. They believed humans would fall just as easily. But this time they were wrong. On the Liberty, Ethan Carter stood in the command room. The screens glowed with data, and the hum of systems filled the air. The crew was quiet but focused. They had trained for this. They knew the trawl were coming. Amanda Brooks worked in engineering with her team, checking every coil, every capacitor, and every rail. She reminded the engineers that every detail mattered, because when the first shot fired, there would be no second chance to fix mistakes. The alert came just before dawn. A long pulse from the outer sensor net reached the Liberty. Dozens of ships were detected on approach. The size of the fleet confirmed it was no pirate group. It was an invasion force. Ethan gave the order to bring the ship to battle readiness. The crew moved without hesitation. Alarms echoed through the decks, but the voices of the men and women stayed steady. They were ready. The trawl fleet entered Earth's space with confidence. Their warlord sat on a throne of steel within the command ship. He watched the blue planet grow larger on his screen and imagined the day it would bow to him. He gave the order to open communications. A sharp message was sent to Earth demanding surrender. Ethan read the message. Amanda read it too. They both smiled without joy. Earth would not bow. The Liberty answered the message with silence. Instead, it charged its main railguns. The power levels climbed. The capacitors glowed. The coils throbbed like a giant heartbeat. Amanda gave the all-clear from engineering. Ethan stood tall at his console. He gave the order to fire. The first railgun slug launched into the dark, moving faster than any plasma bolt or missile. It tore through the void, unseen by the naked eye, until it struck the lead trawl ship. The enemy vessel split apart in a flash of fire. It had no time to raise defenses. The crew inside never even realized what killed them. The trawl warlord shouted in anger. His fleet shifted formation. Energy shields rose like bright walls of light. Plasma cannons lit up the darkness. But the Liberty fired again. And again. Each slug moved so fast and hit so hard that shields collapsed like paper. Another ship was torn open. Another vanished in an explosion of metal and fire. Panic began to spread among the trawl crews. They had fought many battles, but never against weapons like this. Amanda's voice came over the comms. The coils were holding. Temperatures were within limits. The system was performing even better than expected. Ethan directed the gunners with calm precision. He ordered them to target the ships carrying command signals. He knew that breaking the enemy's chain of command would break their will to fight. The Liberty became the sharp edge of Earth's defense, striking again and again with unstoppable force. But the trawl were not weak. Their numbers were great, and their ships carried heavy weapons. Plasma bolts rained down on Earth's defenses. Smaller human ships fought bravely but were battered. One was destroyed, torn apart in fire. The Liberty itself shook as plasma grazed its shields. Sparks flew in engineering. Amanda's team rushed to patch systems. She shouted orders, her voice strong even as alarms screamed. Her hands moved fast, fixing circuits, checking flows, keeping the guns alive. On the bridge, Ethan kept his focus. He saw the damage, but he also saw opportunity. He ordered a concentrated strike at the largest trawl vessel, the one carrying the warlord. The gunners loaded the biggest slugs, dense rods of tungsten meant for the heaviest armor. The capacitors strained. The ship shook. Then the shot fired. The slug tore across space and smashed into the command ship. Shields shattered. Armor broke. The warlord's throne room vanished in flame. The trawl fleet faltered. Without their leader, chaos spread. Some ships turned to flee. Others fired wildly. The Liberty pressed the attack. More railgun shots cut through the enemy. Human pilots and smaller craft used the chaos to strike hard, forcing the trawl further back. What had begun as an invasion turned into a slaughter. The trawl had come to conquer. Instead, they were broken. When the last enemy ship was destroyed or forced into retreat, silence fell across Earth's orbit. The battle was over. The Liberty floated among the wreckage, its crew exhausted but alive. Ethan looked at the screen showing the remains of the enemy fleet. He felt no joy. He only felt the weight of what had just happened. Humanity had fought its first true battle among the stars. And it had won. Amanda joined him on the bridge. Her face was streaked with grease, her eyes tired but burning with energy. She told him the systems had held, though they would need repairs. Ethan thanked her and then thanked the crew. He told them that Earth was safe for now. The crew cheered, though the sound was more relief than celebration. The battle did not go unnoticed. Across the galaxy, signals of the fight spread. Probes recorded fragments of the destruction. Other ships reported what they had seen. The council received the news. Delegates shouted, argued, and denied. Some said it was impossible. Some said it was dangerous. Ilara Voss said nothing at first. She only studied the wreckage images and the clear evidence of kinetic impacts. She knew the truth. Humanity had crossed the threshold. They were no longer just a young race making noise. They were warriors. The council tried to control the story, but stories have a way of spreading. Merchants whispered in ports about humans with weapons that could pierce any shield. Pirates refused to go near Earth. Soldiers in distant armies spoke of the day a small world humbled a mighty fleet. Fear began to spread, and with fear came respect. On Earth, the government faced new choices. They had proven their strength, but they also knew more enemies would come. The trawl would not be the last. The Liberty was repaired and improved. More ships were built, each armed with railguns. The Terran defense fleet grew. Ethan was promoted, though he still led from the front. Amanda was given greater resources to build bigger weapons, including orbital platforms that could defend the entire planet. Humanity was no longer just defending itself. It was preparing to step into the galaxy with power. Yet even as the people of Earth celebrated their survival, Amanda worried. She told Ethan one night that power could change people. She feared humanity might lose itself, that the weapons they built for defense might be used for conquest. Ethan listened. He told her that the future was uncertain, but that they would stand together to guide it. He promised that as long as people like them remembered why they fought, Earth would not fall to greed. Ilara Voss watched from afar. She sent reports warning the Council that humanity was a rising force. She begged them to approach with respect rather than fear, but the Council was divided. Some wanted to welcome Earth, hoping to ally with its strength. Others wanted to crush humanity before it grew too powerful. In the end, no decision was made. The Council chose delay as they so often did. But the galaxy would not wait. In the dark reaches of space, other powers watched. Some saw opportunity, some saw danger, and some began to prepare for war. Humanity's victory had not only saved Earth, it had shaken the balance of power. The age of ignoring Earth was over. Back on the Liberty, Ethan stood with Amanda and the crew. They looked out at the stars, no longer distant points of light, but the paths of their future. They knew more battles would come. They knew the Council would not ignore them any longer. But they also knew they were ready. Humanity had railguns. Humanity had warriors. And now humanity had earned its place among the stars. The battle against the Troll fleet was only the beginning. After their defeat, the galaxy stirred with unease. Across distant systems, whispers spread about the humans and their weapons. Traders told stories of ships torn apart by simple slugs of metal. Soldiers spoke of shields failing against projectiles that could not be stopped. The name of Earth began to carry weight. It was no longer a forgotten planet sending weak signals. It was now a force, and everyone knew it. On Earth, the Terran defense fleet expanded quickly. New shipyards rose along the coasts and in orbit. The Liberty was repaired and became the model for a new generation of warships. Each ship carried railguns as its heart. Some were small, built for patrols. Others were massive, designed to guard the planet itself. Engineers worked day and night. Factories produced coils, slugs, and capacitors at a pace never seen before. Humanity was preparing not for peace, but for the storms that were sure to come. Ethan Carter was promoted to fleet commander. He carried himself with quiet strength, knowing that leadership meant more responsibility than honor. He spent his days on the bridge of the Liberty, drilling new crews and running simulations of battles that had not yet happened. Amanda Brooks became chief designer for orbital defenses. She worked on platforms that could fire slugs the size of cars, powerful enough to strike targets thousands of miles away in seconds. She often stayed awake until dawn, her desk covered in sketches and reports. She knew the future depended on what they built today. The Council could no longer ignore Earth. Reports of the Troll defeat spread too widely. Delegates argued for weeks. Some said humans must be welcomed before they grew stronger. Others said they should be destroyed before they upset the balance. Old rivalries slowed decisions. Finally, emissaries were sent to Earth, carrying demands wrapped in politeness. They told humanity to share its weapons, to submit its fleets for inspection, and to follow Council laws. The message was clear: obey or face consequences. The meeting between the emissaries and Earth's leaders was tense. Ethan stood beside the representatives of the Terran government, his uniform sharp, his eyes steady. Amanda was there too, her hands folded behind her back. The Council emissaries spoke with smooth words but hard eyes. They warned that humanity's railguns could destabilize the galaxy. They insisted Earth must hand over the designs. They tried to remind humanity of its place as a young race, but humanity was no longer listening like a child. Earth's answer was firm. The weapons were not for conquest. They were for defense. Humanity would not share them, nor would it bow. Ethan spoke clearly. He told the emissaries that Earth wanted peace but would not kneel. Amanda added that the railguns were proof of human determination, not toys to be traded. The emissaries left with cold silence, their threats hanging in the air. The message was sent back to the Council. Earth would stand on its own terms. The Council's reaction was sharp. Powerful races began to prepare fleets in secret. Plans were drawn to force humanity into submission. At the same time, other races began to reach out quietly, curious if humans would ally with them instead. The galaxy was dividing, and Earth stood at the center of it all. Ethan knew what was coming. He trained his crews harder than ever. The Liberty and its sister ships practiced formations, crossfire tactics, and ambush drills. They learned how to strike fast and fade, how to use railgun shots to break shields before enemy fire could land. Amanda continued her work on the orbital platforms. Huge rings of metal and coils were built above Earth, floating like silent guardians. When they fired in tests, the slugs burned through targets with terrifying power. The platforms were humanity's shield, the last line between safety and destruction. At night, Ethan and Amanda sometimes found a quiet moment together. They sat in the observation deck of the Liberty, watching the stars. Amanda would admit her fear not of losing, but of what victory could turn them into. Ethan would tell her that power did not define them, choices did. He reminded her that they built railguns not to conquer the stars, but to make sure no one could chain Earth again. She listened and nodded, but the weight in her eyes never left. In the council chambers, Alara Voss spoke once more. She argued that humans were not enemies, but potential allies. She said the council had ignored every warning and now stood at risk of making war where peace was possible. But most delegates did not listen. They feared what they could not control. They prepared for confrontation. Alara left the chamber in frustration, knowing the storm was coming whether she wished it or not. The storm came sooner than anyone expected. A coalition of 3 powerful races assembled a fleet. They said it was for security. In truth, it was meant to intimidate Earth. Hundreds of ships gathered armed with plasma arrays, energy shields, and centuries of battle experience. They set a course for the Blue Planet, their commanders confident that numbers and tradition would crush human defiance. The Liberty was the first to detect the incoming armada. Ethan called for full readiness. The orbital platforms warmed their coils. The fleet moved into formation. Amanda monitored the platforms, her fingers flying across controls as she directed power flows. She felt her heart pound as the meters climbed. This was not a test. This was the moment the world would know if all their work had been enough. The coalition fleet entered orbit with bright shields blazing. They sent one last message demanding surrender. Ethan gave no reply. Instead, he ordered the first volley. The platforms fired together, their slugs streaking silently through the void. The impact was devastating. Shields shattered, ships split apart, and explosions lit the darkness. The coalition commanders reeled in shock. They had expected resistance, not destruction. The Liberty and its sister ships joined the attack. Railguns fired in rhythm, each shot like thunder in silence. Enemy ships tried to regroup, but every move was answered by another slug tearing through armor. Plasma bolts struck back, shaking human shields, but the defense held. Amanda worked furiously to keep the platforms firing, redirecting power when circuits overloaded, guiding teams to repair damage on the fly. Sweat dripped down her face, but her voice stayed calm. She would not let them fail. Ethan's orders were sharp and steady. He directed fire with precision, striking weak points, collapsing enemy formations. He pushed the Liberty forward not as a symbol, but as a spear. Every railgun slug told the galaxy that Earth was no longer prey. It was a hunter. The battle raged for hours. The coalition ships fought hard, but they had no answer to the railguns. One by one, their great vessels fell. Fire lit the skies above Earth, bright enough for people on the ground to see. Families stood in the night, watching streaks of light cross the heavens, not knowing if they were falling stars or the signs of survival. Children asked if the world was ending. Parents held them close and whispered that it was only the beginning. When the last coalition ship broke apart in flames, silence returned. The wreckage of a mighty fleet drifted above Earth, proof of what humanity had become. The Liberty stood battered but unbroken. The platforms still floated, their coils cooling after fire that shook the galaxy. Ethan looked at the screens and felt the weight of command settle deeper on his shoulders. Amanda leaned against a console, exhausted but alive. The crew cheered, but beneath their relief lay the truth. This was not the end. This was the start of something greater. The Council could no longer deny reality. Earth had stood against a coalition fleet and won. Delegates shouted in disbelief, but the facts were clear. Humanity was not a small race to be contained. It was a power that could not be ignored. Fear spread through the chamber. Some called for peace. Others demanded war. Alara Voss closed her eyes and whispered to herself that the galaxy had changed forever. On Earth, people celebrated survival, but leaders prepared for the future. More ships would be built. More platforms would rise. Humanity had stepped fully into the galactic stage, not as a child, but as an equal, and as a threat. Ethan knew the galaxy would keep testing them. Amanda knew the work would never end. But together they stood ready. The stars were no longer distant lights. They were the paths of battles yet to come, and Earth would walk them with railguns at its side. The wreckage of the Coalition fleet drifted above Earth like broken monuments. The battle had ended, but the galaxy had only begun to change. Across the stars, the news spread. Humans had faced the combined power of 3 advanced races, and had not only survived but destroyed them. The story moved faster than light, carried by traitors, probes, and frightened whispers. Humanity had announced itself with fire. On Earth, the people looked up at the sky with pride and fear. Families who had watched the battle from the ground still spoke of the streaks of light they had seen. Some believed they had witnessed falling stars. Others said it was a sign from heaven. But those who knew the truth understood that their world was no longer the same. Earth had entered the stage of galactic powers, and there was no turning back. Ethan Carter stood on the bridge of the Liberty, staring at the drifting debris. His crew was tired, their uniforms torn, their faces marked with smoke and sweat. Yet their eyes shone with determination. They had fought and won a battle many thought impossible. Amanda Brooks walked into the command room, her hands still blackened with grease, her hair sticking to her face. She gave him a tired smile. The platforms had held. The railguns had spoken. Humanity had proven itself. In the days after the battle, Earth celebrated, but the leaders did not rest. New plans were drawn. Shipyards doubled their efforts. Factories expanded production. Engineers refined railgun designs, making them stronger, faster, and more reliable. Amanda was given full command of the orbital defense program. Ethan was placed in charge of all Terran fleet operations. They worked harder than ever, knowing the galaxy would not stay silent. Far away, the council was in chaos. Delegates shouted across the chamber. Some demanded war to crush humanity before it grew too powerful. Others urged diplomacy, hoping to ally with Earth and share its strength. Ilara Voss spoke calmly, reminding them that humanity had only defended itself. She argued that war would only bring more destruction, but her words were drowned by fear. The council could not agree. Their indecision only gave humanity more time to prepare. The galaxy beyond the council did not wait for orders. Independent worlds sent envoys to Earth, offering trade and friendship. Mercenary groups offered their services, eager to learn human weapons. Some empires began to fortify their borders, afraid the railguns might one day turn toward them. The balance of power had shifted, and every world felt the weight of change. Ethan and Amanda met often in the command center. They looked at maps filled with signals and reports. Every week brought new challenges. Pirates tested Earth's defenses but were destroyed quickly. Spies tried to steal railgun designs but failed. Rumors spread of entire fleets preparing to test humanity again. Amanda often worried aloud that they were building too fast, that the heart of Earth might be lost in the rush for weapons. Ethan reminded her that survival came first, and survival required strength. One evening, they walked the length of an orbital platform together. The stars glimmered beyond the viewports. Amanda placed her hand on the metal and said it felt alive, like a beating heart of Earth itself. Ethan told her that the heart was not in the steel or the coils, but in the people who built and manned them. He said the railguns were only tools, but it was the will of humanity that made them powerful. Amanda nodded, though her eyes still carried the shadow of doubt. Months passed. More ships were completed. The Terran Defense Fleet became the Terran Armada. Where once there was only the Liberty, now there were dozens of railgun warships, each named after cities and rivers of Earth. The platforms grew in number, a ring of guardians around the planet. Humanity no longer feared attack. Now it was others who feared Earth. The Council finally sent another delegation. This time they came not with threats but with caution. They asked Earth to join the Council as a member, to share in decisions, to become part of the Order. The offer was tempting to some leaders, but Ethan and Amanda both saw the truth. The Council did not want to share power. They wanted to control it. Earth declined. Instead, humanity declared itself independent, willing to work with allies but unwilling to bow. The refusal shocked the chamber. Some delegates raged. Others trembled. Ilara Voss, however, felt a strange calm. She had always known this day would come. Humanity had claimed its place not by asking, but by proving. She sent a quiet message to Earth offering her friendship. Amanda read it and smiled. Perhaps not all in the galaxy feared them, but the galaxy was not done testing Earth. A massive fleet from a distant empire moved toward human space. They were not allies of the Council, nor friends of the Trawl. They were opportunists, hoping to claim glory by defeating the new power. Their ships were vast, armed with weapons designed to crack planets. They believed no young race could withstand them. Ethan prepared the armada. Amanda readied the platforms. The day came when the enemy fleet entered orbit. The sky above Earth filled with light as the battle began. Railguns thundered, slugs cut through shields. Enemy cannons answered with blasts that shook the heavens. Cities on Earth felt the tremors as explosions bloomed in orbit. The battle was the greatest humanity had ever faced. Hours turned into a day. The fighting raged without pause. Ships were lost. Brave men and women gave their lives to hold the line. Amanda worked without rest, her voice steady as she guided repairs and kept the platforms alive. Ethan stood at the front, directing the armada with calm precision. He ordered strikes that broke enemy formations, sacrifices that saved Earth. Every decision weighed on him, but he did not falter. At last, the tide turned. The armada, bloodied but unbroken, pushed the enemy back. Railgun slugs tore through their largest ship, a vessel the size of a city. It split apart, its fire extinguished in silence. The remaining enemy ships fled, leaving behind wreckage that glowed like falling stars. Earth had stood again, and Earth had won. When the battle ended, Ethan and Amanda stood together once more. They were exhausted, their bodies heavy, their eyes hollow, but they were alive. The platform still floated. The armada still stood. Humanity was safe for now. They looked out at the stars, knowing more battles would come, but also knowing they were ready. The galaxy finally understood. Humans were no longer to be dismissed, no longer to be ignored. They were warriors, builders, and survivors. They had railguns that no shield could stop. They had hearts that no empire could break. They had written their place in the stars with fire and steel. In the quiet that followed, Amanda whispered that she hoped one day they would not need to fight anymore. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder and said that day would come, but only because they were strong enough to make it so. They stood in silence, watching the endless night, knowing that humanity's story among the stars had only just begun. Earth was no longer a quiet planet sending weak signals. It was a beacon, bright and unyielding, and though the galaxy feared it, the truth was clear. Humanity had earned its place. Humanity was ready. Humanity was eternal.